Professor?
Okay. So I'll show you something else really quickly. Boom, boom, boom. Um, so I'm going to stop this share and let's do another share. I'll do a whiteboard share. Okay. So one of the things, and I always prefer formality, and a lot of people might think this is a little bit like memorizing, but I don't like memorizing. I liken it to understanding. So
Yeah.
so you know, if you don't know how to compute a change in something, then like you're dead in the water. So I'm always like, okay, so by change, the change in consumer surplus, what they mean is you have some consumer surplus after um, minus some consumer surplus before,
Mhm.
right? So it's like if you're trying to get like the change in the number of miles that you drove when you got in your car this morning, which I know you didn't, but if you had to drive to school, right?
Yeah.
You would have some mileage, like if you did change in miles, right? You've got some miles after you get to school, which maybe let's say it's like 10,020 because it took you 20 miles to get to school and you started out at 10,000
10,000.
miles. And so the change is the difference between those two numbers, the after and the before, and it's 20, right? Well, in our case, the change in consumer surplus is equal to, um, in this case, it's the consumer surplus after what, right? So like after the change in the quantity in this case, because it's like a price ceiling or a price floor, it'd be after I'll put price control for general, right? In that particular question, I forget, were they asking for a price ceiling or a price floor?
This one was a price ceiling. That's why you would do that's why you would like do the
Pr-
consumer surplus, like finding out the actual one at that ceiling. So I know
yeah,
with floor you just use the equilibrium amount
right. So I would see the CS at the
at equilibrium, I guess.
yeah, a market equilibrium, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and and so So yeah, I always start like this because that way, you know, I'm not memorizing what change is. I mean,
Mhm.
the funny thing is, I always tell, or I don't always, but a lot of times I tell students, listen, economics is codified, which means it's written down, but like common sense. If you really thought about this, you'd go like, oh yeah, of course. I know how to compute a change in something like a change in the miles on my car.
Yeah.
It's just I have to know my ending point and my beginning point, my before and after. So yeah, in your case, so what your question, and the reason why I wanted to be clear about this is because your question is like, well, we know the before,
Yeah.
right? Which is, and I'll try to contrast this. We've got some um, demand, and we've got some supply, right? And
Mhm.
so the consumer surplus before is going to be this whole like upper triangle.
Yeah.
I can just put the the P star, the equilibrium price, and you can see the Q star. So now the other part of the question is like, oh, okay, so suppose we have a price ceiling and it's a binding price ceiling. Like I said, you got to be a little bit careful with
With the
Ignithium.
terminology.
Well, just because Ignithium will sometimes on some of the questions. Like I said, my estimate of the probability, because I've if you do enough of the practice, you'll see.
Mhm.
Sometimes it'll give you ones price ceilings that are binding, and then about one every 6 times it'll give you one that's non-binding.
So
If
I
it's non-binding, then obviously there's nothing going on. And then I just want to point one other thing out just to finish answering your question, is that if this is the binding, let's just call it price ceiling price,
yeah,
then um, sellers will only want to sell,
that
uh,
much.
yeah, the quantity
Oh,
where it
okay.
intersects with the supply, right? So I'll say
Hmm.
this is, well, actually, what matters is it's the quantity supplied at that price.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can see it on my diagram clearly,
Yeah, I can
but it's good.
I get what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be,
Where
and let me,
supply and that P
yeah,
triangle intersect essentially.
yeah. So I'll, just to be really, really clear, I'm gonna, that point,
Yeah.
and QS with the little cap on it. That's what the little arrow is. It's a cap.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that's the quantity, and then you can see the trapezoid that you showed, right? Because it's only going to be these first from 0 to QS units that are purchased by consumers because suppliers don't want to sell anymore.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess my other question is that in terms of like what area to solve for, let's say that P cap is above the market price, the market equilibrium.
oh yeah, well then it's non-binding price ceiling.
So it's non-binding in that case.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what, like I said, I mean, you're going to solve these problems. The first question is the price control binding or not binding? You have to answer that. And for the price ceiling, only a price ceiling that's below the equilibrium price is
Is binding.
binding. And for a price floor, only, or price ceiling below the market equilibrium is binding. And for price floor, it's a price floor above the equilibrium price that is
Yeah.
binding.
Yeah,
So
because I
they're
okay.
opposite of each other.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I was like looking at this and I was like, wait, like when you were explaining, I was like, okay, then how would we find like what area to find if we're doing price ceiling above
Yeah,
or
but
price floor above? But you
well,
just
yeah, well, price floor above would be binding. A price ceiling above would be non-binding.
mhm.
So that's why it also gets a little bit,
Yeah.
I mean, hey, listen, applied math is not a major for everyone,
Yeah.
you know, because because the applied part causes all of these problems because nobody is doubting that you can multiply, subtract, add, divide. If somebody gives you an equation, solve for the missing value. We all know you know how to do that.
Yeah.
But econ, the reason why it's challenging, and some people like, one really good way to know. I mean, this is your major now, so either you got to get good at it, which you probably will, or you gotta scratch your head and go like, okay, I'm not really ready for this. Like maybe I got to do something else. But this is, in a nutshell. I don't know if you remember or if you were the type of person. I happen to be like, every once in a while somebody notices some talent that they have, and I have a little tiny talent, and my tiny talent is that I was the kid that we would get to the word problem section, which is like in your math homework. Normally they would have like, 6 or 7 questions at the end of every chapter where they would have like some word problems. And I liked doing the word problems. And
Yeah.
that every econ question is
Is a word problem.
a math word problem. And I
Yeah.
remember people saying to me like, "Oh, I can do math. I'm just no good at word problems. I just don't like the word problems." And I was kind of scratching my head going, "But that's like the fun part." You get to like read a situation that's supposed to be something, real, and you're not just, playing with the numbers, but you're figuring out what the numbers mean and all that stuff. And so yeah, my tiny talent is that I like word problems.
Okay.
So if and I think that's probably at least half of the reason why I ended up with a PhD in economics is just because I like word problems. It's like if you were somebody that was out on the basketball court and you just wanted to shoot basketball balls all day because you thought it was fun. Well, eventually you're going to get good, right? Yeah, I mean, if you like word problems, you're in the right place. If you don't, then you got to at least, make peace with the word problems in our discipline, and then you can forget about them and all the other ones. But yeah, you have to look at the words and be like, okay, what are they really talking about here? And there's normally some trick, and it's not a big trick, but it's like, oh, I can't just run and solve it. I've got to first see, is this the situation that applies? Is it binding or is it non-binding? And then I can go forward, and I know
Okay,
how to do it. So anyway, thumbs up.
thanks.
We're all good. Okay, well, are there other questions? So are you good, Sonica? You're totally fine now? Oh, you unmuted, you muted again.
Kind of. I was just like, I guess the only question I had was like if it was a price floor that was binding, like in this situation, you would only find the area that's like,
Well, check this out. We just go boom. There's a
yeah.
binding price floor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'll change this to, let's see if I can find the right symbol on my keyboard. I don't want to use the same one. I can't find it on my keyboard, but
Underscore.
well, okay, let's use underscore. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, and so now, right? It's there, and yeah, the consumer surplus then is,
That small one.
yeah, the small
Okay.
triangle. It's the, you know that's why I don't know, um, if you remember from the lecture, but I told you guys, I'm like, hey, there's this verbal definition, or
Yeah.
spoken definition of consumer surplus and producer surplus.
Mhm.
And again, this is kind of like an applied math thing. It's like if you're going to interpret these diagrams, whenever you're doing consumer surplus, like in almost all cases, you're going to have a demand curve. So it's the area below the demand curve, above the price that consumers pay, and to the left of the quantity that they purchase. And you
Mhm.
notice I say, above the price the consumer pays, right? I don't say above the price the seller receives. I use that seller receives for the definition of producer surplus. And that's because sometimes, like in the next section, the price that consumers pay and the price that sellers receives is different,
Yeah.
which is not the typical situation. It's a new situation. It's when we have a tax, or there's some sort of a transaction cost in the middle. There's a middle person that gets, the seller, the buyer pays one price, and then the government or somebody else takes part of it out, and the seller gets the rest.
Mhm.
And that affects the division of consumer and producer surplus.
Okay.
So, so anyway, yeah, but
Yeah.
but in this case, yeah, now it's a little triangle for consumer surplus.
Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah, I understand like the whole like demand thing. That's why it turns into a trapezoid for this problem. Okay,
Yep.
I
Okay.
got it. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Okay. So let us continue on.
Excuse me.
Sure, Daniel.
Just checking for the homework. I know for the assessments we have to like actually type the answers into Ignithium too, but for the practice homework, do we only need to submit it on Turnitin?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the way I have things set up right now is, again, so you guys can do the infinite practice, and all it tells me is that you were on there, but
Gotcha.
but
Thanks.
it doesn't record whether you got the right or wrong answer or anything like that. But I want to see that you guys are practicing in a way that you would for the exam. That's the reason why I have you guys turn it in. So good.
Gotcha, thanks. Because like it kind of bugged out in the middle of me doing it, and whenever I tried to refresh the page, it gave me different problems, so I couldn't just reset the problem set.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the things is, and it's okay because, like I said, it doesn't matter if you log out and log back in and you get different problems, other than like what I recommend students do is because a couple things can happen. There can be some disruption in the connection. It could be your Wi-Fi, or I mean, I have things like that happen all the time because my kids are always streaming and everything like that. And every once in a while, my connection just and if it loses connection, then when it refreshes, it'll reset the numbers or it'll log me out or something like that. But um, almost all websites, and I think I timed it, and it's 90 minutes. So like if you're playing around or doing something and you go and you come back, then it'll be gone. So what I normally recommend students doing is you can do the same thing that you do for practice that you do for the homework. If you like are invested in a problem set, because sometimes they're like connected, is when you first go on to the site and you get some problems that you like, then you can take a screenshot if you want to preserve those problems. But then go and look at all the hints, because I have the hints set at the answers. So then you can write all the answers down, and then
Gotcha.
that way, if like again you're invested, like, oh, I wanted these 4 problems are connected and I got through 3 of them, and I really want to know what the answer to the 4th one is, but I'm going to be working on it and now I'm going to go get a burger or something, I'm going to come back and then it's going to be gone. Then the way to stop that is to just go like, okay, this is what I'm going to work on, and then either do a screenshot or take a picture of it with your telephone. That's what I sometimes do, and then open the hints, and then write down those answers, and then you can work on it and you're fine. And then if you want to do a different version, you can refresh it. But yeah, it's there are special ways to play in a friendly manner with the Ignithium stuff, and I've been doing it for a while, so if if you pay attention to my tips and tricks, then you'll probably have a more satisfying experience. But yeah, okay, is that good, Daniel? You're
Yeah,
fine.
thanks.
You're welcome. And okay, so blah 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 blah. Okay, so let me stop sharing for a minute and go back to this. Okay, so okay, so now, and I want to point out 2 things to everybody. So, oh, see, this is the type of error that comes up sometimes, which is annoying. A double minus sign. That's no good. So I'll change the problems. So you want to check and make sure you don't have that kind of an issue before you start solving the problems. But this is our last section before we take our first exam. And I wanna for anybody that's not, I'll tell you guys 2 things, and hopefully you remember them, because I may not repeat them, but they're important for your grade in the class. Um, so so one is that normally on the exam, in addition to your Ignithium questions, I'll ask you to explicitly like graph either a price ceiling or a price floor, or in this case, like a tax. And like Sanika and I were working on together, like show me a before and after picture where you've shaded in the consumer and producer surplus and maybe the tax revenue and a deadweight loss. And so obviously those things, like if you solve the problems the way that I do, I always would draw those diagrams. So it's no big deal. But I know there are a few folks out there, because I looked at the sample exam that was submitted, that for whatever reason they prefer to do their solutions just numerically. And I'm agnostic on the technique. I tell you guys the way that I think is the simplest, most robust way to do it. But math is math, and if you roll your own and you get the right answer, I'm not going to criticize you. But about 15% of your exam grade will be, which is a significant portion, right? I mean, that's the difference between an A and a B, and so it's a significant portion will be on diagramming, because that's another skill, right? So there's no case in economics where you'll ever be dealing with a situation where your employer or whoever you're explaining some analysis to doesn't need some and a way to communicate within the discipline, doesn't want some visual support to accompany the information that you're giving to them. So this is a core competency within our discipline, to be able to depict these solutions when we share them. So that's just a heads up. Make sure you can graph this stuff and that the graphs look good enough to support the types of answers that you're calculating, because again, you could get a perfect score and have adequate documentation for every single one of your answers, and then if you don't know how to graph what you were working on, you drop your grade by 15%. And you'd be surprised, but there are students who are otherwise excellent in their performance in the class, but when I look at, and I normally will review those graphing portions of the exam at the end of the semester, like during the grading period. I'll just print out all of those sections of the exam, and then I'll look at them and score them. So you could think that you're going to get an A in the class based on your Ignithium stuff, and if you didn't graph anything properly, then you might end up getting a B. So, or if you thought you were going to get a B, you get a C or a low C or something like that. So do take time to review the graphs, and even if you're not going to use them in documenting your work, that you know how to graph it at the end for the graphing exercise. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? That's just a heads up. And one other thing too is I put an announcement on Ignithium, and you guys should have all seen it. Not Ignithium, on Blackboard, that you need to follow the instructions too. So if there are any questions about that, please refer to the exam review or information sheet that everybody's supposed to sign and put their initials on. I mean that's signed by typing into it, and follow those exam instructions. Again, we need uniformity in the way that we're submitting our things, especially since we're doing all this stuff online. And the last thing I'll tell you, and I should mention this probably once more before we take the final, but one of the things that's an overarching theme in this class, and we spent a lot of time on, was the first fundamental welfare theorem. And you won't see that explicitly in any of the problems in Ignithium, but if you forget the first fundamental welfare theorem, that's going to be something that almost surely you'll be asked about on the final exam. Like, again, it'll be like a separate question. You'll have all your Ignithium questions, and then it'll be like, explain in your own words or demonstrate or something like that the first fundamental welfare theorem. And it is supposed to be pretty straightforward, but there's one of these things that if you don't remember, it will inhibit you from otherwise doing really well in the class. So anyway, we're on this last section, and it has to do with taxes and subsidies. So one of the things that I want to show you guys, and can you guys see this screen? It's yellow.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So this is the kind of like quick way for me to cover the material on taxes and subsidies. So I think I also already asked you guys to review some lectures, and those are lectures that I use from principles, but just to remind you of what's going on. And these are the same types of problems. The difference between the problems on the micro 2 and the micro 1, as you can see, the micro 1 stuff is already graphed out for the students. So this is what I use for the principal students, but they cover a lot of the same material, a little bit less in depth. But notice the language here. The tax is levied on the seller, right? So because it's levied on the seller, I'm shifting the supply curve up to reflect the tax. Okay. And then let's see so now here, there's a tax that's levied on the buyer. And because it's levied on the buyer, I'm shifting the demand curve down in order to model the tax. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So if a problem, and this is kind of like the like a big picture issue, and maybe one that we can talk about later on Thursday. But yeah, the big picture issue is that if the problem, so here it says the buyer pays a per unit tax of 15, seller pays. So this is about how to model the tax. So it turns out that one of the big overarching ideas is that it really doesn't matter who the tax is levied on. You can think of the tax as being an administrative requirement for which party is supposed to collect the tax during the transaction and turn it over to the government. But if you listen to those other lectures, then you'll find out that it doesn't really affect what we call the tax incidence or the tax burden on the parties. Whenever I'm gonna model a tax, right, I always just show it on the seller's side. because that makes sense to me. When I think of the sellers paying a tax, I can think of the taxes raising. Remember, the supply curve reflects the cost of producing something. So I can think of the tax as just adding to the seller's cost, right? And since I know that it doesn't really matter which side I model the tax on, it's the magnitude of the tax and then the elasticity of demand and supply, which has to do with the slope of the demand and supply curves that actually determine the economic impacts on the parties. So I always just put the tax on supply, even though I know if I modeled it on demand, it would end up being the same. It's just the diagram is going to look different. So if you pay attention to the lectures, that's one of the big ideas that you guys will figure out. So let's go ahead and get started with this. And so we'll have question number 1. So given the demand and supply system here, how much will be demanded if buyers pay a per unit tax of 15? Okay. So you guys, let's put a couple of people. So how about Mauricio? You there this morning? Mauricio? Okay. And how about Nicole? You there?
Mauricio said having problems with mic.
Oh, okay. And in the chat, thank you. Okay. And what about Nicole? Is she here? And how about Diego? You here? And what about Jewel? Are you here? Do you have a mic, Diego? I do not. Okay. Well, time to buy one. Time to go get one. Amazon. So, and do we have Jewel? Okay.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, yay. Okay, so we have Jewel, and what about Alexander Galvan?
Question, you said that the tax would be on the supply curve. So when I graph it, I would
Well,
tax.
see, this is the whole thing and you have to watch the lectures to make sure. I was just doing like a quick review, but so you can model it on the supply or on the demand side.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're saying you can either shift the demand curve down by the amount of the tax or shift the supply curve up by the amount of the tax.
Okay.
You can do either one. What the question is suggesting is that you shift demand down. But I'm telling you, you don't really have to do that. I prefer to shift the supply curve up always. And you know, if you go through the lecture like carefully, then you'll find out that mathematically it just doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
so and that's kind of like one of those inside pieces of information that only people that are econ majors know.
Okay.
But okay, so but no Alexander. Okay. I gotta find one other person. How about Ricardo Ruiz?
I'm here.
Okay, Ricardo, okay. So we'll ask you and Jewel to be in charge for number one. I'll come back to you guys, or you guys and girls. I'm using guys as a general term. It includes ladies and gentlemen. So, but for you all, I'll come back to you in just a few minutes and we'll talk about the answer, okay? So it's okay. See you guys in just a few minutes. Okay, so how it's Jewel and Ricardo, right? So how's
Yeah,
it
hi.
going? Hi. Well, Ricardo, how are you
Um,
doing?
Good.
Good. Okay. Were you going to ask a question? Is that you, Jewel?
yeah, I got the answer.
Okay, so you have an answer. Good.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, I just
Okay.
need a
Oh,
little bit of clarity
you need a little bit of what?
clarity on how to graph it. I did it mathematically,
Okay,
and
fair enough. So hopefully we'll give that to you. And why don't you and Ricardo go ahead and put your answers in the chat. You can just put your okay. So Ricardo got 14.83 and Jewel got 14.83. Okay, good. So Jewel, since you and Ricardo agree, why don't you go ahead and write your little calculation in the chat? Like, how do you get it?
okay, so I basically just subtracted the tax ceiling from the demand equation. So
Okay.
10 minus 4 quantity minus 15, and then I set that equal to the supply.
Are you still typing? Oh, okay. Okay, good. And then you solve for Q.
Yeah, and then I solved for Q basically. Yeah.
Okay, so now, did you do it exactly the same way, Ricardo?
Let me look at hers really quick. Did you subtract 15 there?
Yeah, I subtracted 15, which made the 95 minus 4Q, and then I
Yeah,
set that equal to.
so notice, I just want to write this to be explicit. I'm gonna copy what you have for your first line, Jewel, and I'm gonna set it equal to that,
Okay.
right? You simplified in the second one.
Yeah.
Is that what you did, Ricardo?
Well, for mine, I graphed them,
Okay.
and then I added a second supply line,
Okay.
but that one I added 15
Right.
to it.
So do you want to type your equation there?
Okay.
Okay. Well, I know what you did, but I'm going to rewrite yours too, just to make it. So notice what I wrote here, okay, and now if we do it the same way, we're going to have 110 minus 4q, and then, by the way, you didn't do anything wrong at all, Ricardo. You just kind of simplified 2, but then I'm going to do 6 plus 2q plus the tax, right? Now look at, you agree, Ricardo?
No,
I
yeah,
just,
that's how I have it written out, but I shortened it for the.
yeah, but notice Jules' method and your method, right? All they involve is moving the 15 from one side of the equation to the other, right? And so then Jewel had asked about graphing. So I'm gonna well, actually, so I'll stop sharing for a minute, and then I'm gonna share a whiteboard with you. Okay. Oh well, I was trying to share, so stop share. Share screen, whiteboard, share. Okay, and then and this is actually perfect because this is our first like major learning objective. And so I'll do Jules' way first. And so here's the original demand, right? And that would start it. Stop me if anything is confusing. And we'll do supply and right. Or excuse me, so that's a shifted demand curve. So hopefully it's clear that what we did was move the demand curve down by the amount of the tax. So now we're at 95. So are you with me, Jewel?
Yeah, you pretty much just cleared it entirely up. I completely just forgot how the demand curve shifts down on the supply curve. So everything.
Yeah, yeah. And notice, so this is a parallel shift.
Mhm.
So the gap here is the amount of the tax
Got it. Yeah.
for every possible quantity, right?
Mhm.
And so, and then, and this is important. So still pay attention for a minute, because now we're gonna do Ricardo's, and over here, and if I've done a good job. So remind me, what was the vertical intercept for the supply curve? Somebody. It was 6, right?
Yep.
6.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
6.
I don't have my quiz on.
So now I'm gonna do, hopefully that looks like the same supply curve. And by the way, I'll add a few more details in here in just a second. And hopefully that looks like the same demand curve, because it's supposed to be. But now, on Ricardo's side, we moved the supply curve up by 15. So we went from 6 to 21. So we moved it up by the amount of the tax, right? And so you with me, Ricardo?
Yeah.
So we did that, and then I also want to point out, so this means that, again, this gap between these two parallel lines is the amount of the tax everywhere, okay? So the next thing to notice is, and I'll try to do it here. So this is our, are they gonna let me do it? New equilibrium in green, and this is our new equilibrium in green, right? But they both occur at 14, the after-tax equilibrium is 14.83. And over here, it's 14.83. So the new equilibrium quantity is the same no matter what. Agreed?
Yeah, but the price is different for both.
Well, okay, this is another important point. And again, on October 1st, I asked you guys to watch like 4 videos, and 2 of them were tax review videos. So go back and look at those. But what I want to point out is that there's another way to do this diagram. And this is a really common way of doing it for these types of problems. It's not going to change your algebra any, but it's a little bit distracting to see the shifted demand or supply curves. So you see, here's the shifted demand, here's the shifted supply, and the only point of doing the shift is to be able to find this new equilibrium point in either case, okay? And then, Ricardo, you said, oh, but the prices are different. But no, they're actually not any different. And hopefully the next diagram is going to make that clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and redraw. Well, actually, I didn't want to do it in green. I'm going to redraw the diagram, and I'll have the original demand curve. This is called a tax wedge diagram, okay? And it's used often because it's just clear. So here you see the original demand and supply, and we said that's 110, and down here it's at 6. And notice we haven't even shown the shifted demand or supply. But then what we do is we simply, it's going here, let me, okay. We show, I wanted a different color. So we show what we call a tax wedge, and I'm gonna make it so it's a little bit closer to the same size. So notice this is supposed to be a vertical line, and you can measure it on the vertical axis. It's supposed to be a distance of 15 units, in this case $15. So I'll go back here, and it's supposed to represent this distance. I'll draw it again. Let's say in orange. So, and maybe I'll do a double headed arrow. It's supposed to be this distance here, okay? And that represents the amount of the tax. It's the amount that we shifted the demand or supply. And in both cases, it's supposed to represent a distance of 15 units on the vertical axis, or $15. So I'll do this. I'll actually delete, do it this way. And I put a little label here, 15. Okay. And okay. So Jewel and Ricardo, you see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so over here, and maybe I'll redo this in orange too, and I'll use the double-headed arrow. So I just do this, say, okay, that's 15, and then I just snugly put it in there, making sure it's vertical between the original demand and supply curve. And so it turns out, if I've done it correctly, what I've just omitted is there's an unseen, maybe I'll do it in light blue. There's an unseen, like, shifted demand curve here, right? Or an unseen shifted supply curve. Like that. But other than using the shifted demand or the shifted supply to find this green point, which is the after-tax equilibrium, which identifies the after-tax equilibrium quantity, those shifted demand and supply curves contain no other information for us. So that's why this tax wedge diagram is often used, because it's just simple. It omits something that you'll kind of like learn this over time, and that is that there's an art to the type of richness you want in a diagram, because if you put too many details there, then a lot of times it distracts the viewer, the audience member, the person you're trying to communicate with, so that they can't really see clearly what's the main point you're trying to illustrate. Anyway, and that's really kind of the value of this tax wedge diagram, is it strikes that balance. So we can see the after-tax quantity, and hopefully, can you see it's associated with this quantity, Jewel and Ricardo? I mean, this tax wedge.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll show you one other thing, and I'll do it in green too. Is that now we have these 2 points on one diagram, and those are the 2 green points here that are on separate diagrams, right? Now, the reason why we want them both on one diagram, I mean, they're just where the tax wedge fits in the diagram, but one of them corresponds to the P sub B, the buyer's after-tax price, and the other one corresponds to P sub S, the seller's after-tax price. Okay. And I don't know if this is going to be really helpful or not, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to try to make things clear. Because we don't have numbers here, and I think sometimes folks get confused. So, okay. So, does that make sense? So, this is one of those places where you probably need to understand a little bit, you know, a little bit about this verbiage. What do we mean by wedge? So, has anybody ever seen a tool called a wedge? Have you ever seen a wedge, Jewel or Ricardo?
Not really, or as a tool, no.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna. Okay. So I go back and stop share and then share screen. This is Google Images. Can you guys see this stuff? The images of wedge. Can you see Jewel, Ricardo?
Yeah, I could see.
So like that's one image. This is really the one that I always think of. But this works, that works, this works. And do you know what they use for these wedges for? They use it for splitting things, like splitting big chunks of wood if you can't do it with an axe. So like this one's old school. You put the narrow end on some big chunk of wood, and then you hammer the back of it with a sledgehammer, that kind of thing, and you split it apart. So what happens is, share screen again. I'll go back to my whiteboard. And so what happens is that it's a metaphor, but economists think of originally there's some equilibrium price, P star, that the market presents. And then the tax acts like a wedge and splits that price into two prices. And after the tax, you end up with a buyer equilibrium price with the tax and a seller's equilibrium price with the tax. And if you think about it, it makes sense. So Jewel, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So this is really the way that taxes work, right? I mean, when you go down, I don't know if you pay attention when you go to Target or something, but you pay sales tax on everything, right?
Mhm.
And so do you go to Target or where do you like to shop?
I like to go to Target.
Yeah. You know, actually, for my daughters, Target's one of their happy places.
Yeah, you
Especially,
go ready to spend 10 and you come out spending like 80. It just happened.
well, especially during the pandemic, they like going to Target and just walking around. So, I mean, they buy stuff, sure, but they just like Target's a happy place for them. So, I don't know. Is there anything you routinely buy at Target?
Yeah, I buy like a lot of like toiletries, like
Okay, yeah, they actually like our Target has like a nice like section now that's kind of like a mini Sephora thing.
I've seen that. I've seen that.
Yeah. Do you want to say hi to my students? This is my daughter Emma.
Hi.
Yeah, she
I
just
was
got back from
expecting her to be,
Target.
I was expecting her to be so young, and then she's like a teenager.
Yeah,
No,
I was expecting.
actually she's a freshman in college now. She just turned 18. Well, yeah, you expect her to be so much younger because I'm so young, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
Okay, bye. She's going to her job now because I don't pay all of her Target bills. So anyway, yeah, so yeah, they have like a little Sephora, but anyway, so the point is actually you can buy some like more expensive things now at Target for as far as toiletries is concerned, like little perfumes and lotions and things like that. Um, but I guess what I was getting to is that you probably don't think much about the sales tax. But if you buy something that's expensive, the sales tax in California is, I know that they say 7.25, that's the state sales tax, but a lot of times there's local sales tax depending upon where you are, and it can even be like 9. What I always do when I think about sales tax is I just add 10% to the price because it's easy to calculate, right? 10% of $1.50 is 15 cents. Just move the decimal place over 1. And then I never have a bad surprise when I go to the register, right? I know if I'm going to spend $100, that with tax, it's going to be about 110, right? But so if you think about it, the way that things are in Target and with the sales tax, I'm paying the whatever is the listed price. Like if something is listed at, let's say, I want to do $20. Let's see if I can get this thing to straighten out. Okay. Then what the buyer, what I'm actually going to pay is about $22, right? You follow me, Jewel?
Yeah.
So when we say buyer's price, what we mean is the amount that I actually get debited out of my checking account or that I actually pay in cash, what I'm actually putting out. That's the buyer's price. And the price the seller receives is the after-tax price. This other amount goes to the government. So yeah, there's in the normal situation, meaning when there is no tax in an unregulated market, then P star is just one price. It's a price that a buyer pays and a seller receives. Whatever goes from the buyer goes directly to the seller, and that's it. But as soon as you introduce a tax, now you have these two different prices. You have a price that the buyer's paying, the amount the buyer's paying, that's a buyer's price. And then a chunk of that goes to the government. And then what's left over is what the seller actually receives for the good. So now we can go ahead and talk about these different areas. And is everything clear, Ricardo? Are you good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this area up here would be the consumer surplus after the tax, this little triangle. It's the area below the demand curve above the price the buyer pays and to the left of the quantity that they purchase. This little area down here would be the producer surplus that goes to the seller. And this area in here would be the tax revenue that's generated. So it's this rectangular region. Why is it a rectangle? Well, again, if you just think about what tax revenue is, tax revenue is the amount of the tax, right? Times the number of transactions completed with a tax, which is the after-tax quantity. And down here, I guess I'll put it the after-tax quantity. Okay. And then there's this little area here. And I don't want to do it in brown, orange. This little triangle here. And this is what we would call the deadweight loss of the tax, which is equal to the change in net social benefit, which is also, I put triple equals because it's exactly the same thing, the change in total surplus. Okay. Now, I do have to say a little bit, you guys will notice, and I mentioned this before, deadweight loss, because we use the word loss here, it assumes there's a negative sign, and we know that the change in net social benefit and the change in total surplus will always be a decrease, because the first fundamental welfare theorem says the market level of total surplus is the highest possible. So when we do the change, these will always be negative numbers. So deadweight loss is actually the absolute value of either of these. And some of the answers on Ignithium ask you, you'll notice one's positive and the other one's negative, and it all has to do with whether or not you're talking about the deadweight loss, which is like, how much money did you lose in Vegas? And you say, I lost $100. And then I say, well, how much did your checking account go down? And you'd say, well, or not down, how much did your checking account change? And you would say minus 100. It's that kind of a difference. So now, so is everything clear, Ricardo and Jewel? Was that everything making sense?
Yeah, everything's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'll open it up. Does anybody else have any questions about this stuff? No. Okay. And okay. So these are the two different ways of modeling the tax. And this is a single diagram that can be used to calculate all of the welfare effects. When I say modeling the tax, I mean finding the after-tax equilibrium quantity. And once you find the after-tax equilibrium quantity, the remaining part of what you want to do is find these welfare effects. There's one thing I want to point out, which is asked in some of the questions, and that is that sometimes we focus on a related concept, okay? And it's called tax incidence or tax burden. And so to understand tax incidence and tax burden, you have to focus on the original equilibrium price, P star, okay? And so I'll go ahead and well, they should be exactly the same height. So I'm gonna go P star, and hopefully, well, we never calculated it in the Ignithium example. So let's stop sharing for a minute, and well, let's see. We'll go back to here. And so I'll point out, so these remaining questions have to do with calculating the buyer's after-tax price and the seller's after-tax price. And so why don't we go ahead and I'll, okay. Sebastian, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll put Sebastian on deck, and how about Stephen Doe, you here?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do number 3, and I'll give you guys like 5 minutes to do number 3, okay? Move on. But yeah, so the answer to number 3 that you all gave is right. Good job. So so let's go on ahead and move on to number 5. Okay, and let's see. So James, are you with us this morning?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so we'll put you in charge of number 5 along with, how about Miriam? Are you here? Miriam? Okay. I'm not getting Miriam. Okay, what about Marlena? Marlena? I saw you unmute for a minute, Marlena, but it just, maybe your mic's just not quite working. How about Priscilla?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. So you want to go ahead and work on number 5 also? So I'll give you a few minutes. Okay. How's it going?
I'm not sure how to solve it. Okay.
Good. That's, at least you know what you don't know. That's half the battle. So, and what about you, James? How's it going? James?
Oh.
Oh.
My mic was going all weird.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So how's it going?
I thought you were muted. My bad.
I'm not muted now, right?
All right. We're cool. Yeah.
So how's it going?
I'm still working on it.
Okay. So keep working. I'm gonna talk to Priscilla for a minute. Hey, Priscilla.
Hi.
So you wrote down the numbers, right? You've got demand and supply. They're actually pretty similar, and you've got the tax, right? Did you try to graph it?
No.
Okay. Well, so my suggestion would be, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and then I'll go back to sharing the whiteboard. My suggestion would be, so, and like we found out this last time, it doesn't matter if we graph. Can you see the diagrams we've been working on?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if we graph it using the demand or the supply, we'll get the same answer in terms of the after-tax quantity, and then we can identify the two different prices, because again, our after-tax equilibrium is going to be different than most of our other equilibria that we've been dealing with so far, in that we get one quantity, but we get two different prices. So one quantity here and two different prices. And just to be clear, in case it's not obvious, that the other price in each of these diagrams is just on the other curve directly above or below let's see, boom. See how it's just right above, but it's on the demand?
Yeah.
See, like this? So that's reflected here and here in the tax switch diagram. So, and as I said before, for me, my favorite diagram is this one. I like shifting the supply curve rather than the demand curve, just because so the one circled in yellow there is my favorite one. But so let's go back to your problem, Priscilla. So I should ask you, Priscilla, do you have a problem?
Do I have a
problem? Yeah. And you know what your answer would be? Yes, of course. It's number 5. I'm having trouble with that one, right? So,
Yeah.
so you have to graph the original demand and the original supply curve. I mean, that's what I would do if I was going to solve this. So, if you graph the original demand and supply curve, then so I'll go ahead and get rid of this diagram over here, since we're just going to focus on shifting the supply curve. And I'll dump that. So our tax, right, is supposed to be how much?
18.
Yeah, so I'm just going to make this. Nope. Okay, so that's 18. That's the distance there. And our demand curve, what's its vertical intercept?
113.
Yeah, 113, right? And our original supply curve has an intercept where?
6.
Okay, it's 6. And so the shifted supply curve should have an intercept of what?
Of 18. Wait,
Should it?
24.
Yeah, 24, because it's 6 plus 18, right? So now you have your diagram. To answer these questions, notice this is the pink one this is the original equilibrium, right? So that's where the original demand and supply curves cross. You know how to find that, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one part. And then you either, in our case, because we shifted the supply curve, now you have to find this after-tax equilibrium point up here, which is where this shifted supply curve intersects with the original demand curve, right? And then you'll get a new equilibrium quantity, and then you can find these points because you're just taking this equilibrium quantity, right, and finding the height of these two respective curves. To be clear, once you find where, if you plug this quantity into the original demand curve, once you find the value or the height of the original demand curve, then you just add the amount of the tax to get the height of the shifted supply curve. So this is the original supply curve, sorry, and that's the shifted supply curve. So you just plug whatever this after-tax quantity is into it. So let me do one other thing really quickly. I'll trade this label, because we don't know what the value is, for just QT for the after-tax quantity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So do you think you can solve it now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll go to back to. Okay, so how did you do, James? So question number 5 says again, with this tax. And by the way, I will mention one thing, and this is just a language issue. So where it says specific tax, we haven't talked about the species of taxes, but the sales tax is an example, and we don't deal with sales taxes, even though sales taxes are very similar. You're not going to find they're any different than these specific taxes. But sales taxes are based on the value of the good. So sometimes they're called ad valorem, right? It's 10% of the price. So if you buy something that's $100, the tax is $10. But if you buy something $10, the tax is only $1. So the tax varies with the price of the good. But a specific tax is sometimes called an excise tax, and it's based on the quantity of the good. So to give you an example, if you go down to the gas station and you look on the side, have you ever done that, Priscilla? There's a little plaque on the side of the pump. Do you know what I'm talking about? It says what the taxes are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you notice what does it say? It says something like, well, tell me about what you've seen on the plaque that's on the side of the gas pump. When you're pumping gas for your car. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So let's see. We'll stop share. And let's go share screen. I'll share that one more time. Go here. This tax sign in California on pump. Let's see. More images. I'm sure somebody took a picture of this. Maybe. This is it. Can I get this to be bigger? So you're standing at the gas pump. You've done that, Priscilla, right?
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Don't give me this. Can you see what I'm sharing right here? And then you look at, there's this little, dang it. I'm getting all of these darned. It's not just going to let me see. You saw the little plaque I was talking about. It's this one.
Yeah, I saw it.
And I don't want any free articles. Dang. Los Angeles Daily News. Yeah, I'll go back. Okay, but you can see it here, right?
Yeah.
And notice it says, what does it say? Motor vehicle fuel prices include the following taxes in cents. And what's that say?
Per gallon.
Per gallon. So that's each gallon you buy, each unit. The feds charge 18.4 cents. The state charges 36 cents per gallon. So that's together how much? I'm waiting.
54.4.
Yeah, so they're charging 54, 55, we'll round up just because it's taxes. 54 cents, that's rounding down, 55 cents per gallon that you purchase. That's an example of an excise tax or a specific tax. That's a tax per unit. It doesn't matter if gas is $5 a gallon or $2 a gallon. The government, Fed and state, are going to charge 55 cents a gallon, which is pretty interesting, right? I don't know if you've thought about it, but you know, if gas prices are $3.50 a gallon, by just eliminating that tax, they could be back down to $3 a gallon.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, a specific tax is a tax per unit. So what did you come up with for number 5 then, Priscilla? You want to put your answer in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're waiting. And then we'll do your answer. You can put yours in too, James, if you want to now. Oh, you did yours private, Priscilla. I thought you'd do it to everyone. So James.
Sorry.
That's okay. Okay. So I'm thinking this is probably not right, but I don't know. What did you come up with, James? Yeah, so James came up with 23.6. So let's talk a little bit about what you did first, Priscilla, and try to understand how you got that answer. So I'm going to do stop share, share screen, whiteboard, share. Okay. So what calculation did you perform, Priscilla?
I added 18 to the equation, and
For
then
the supply, right?
yeah, it's a supply.
So your new equation, and you can give it to me. So what you did is you had 113 minus what? This is for the
Minus
demand.
4.
4Q
Mm-hmm.
equals 24 plus, what was it?
2Q.
2Q. And then you got
14.
You got Q is equal to 14.83. And I'm sure that calculation is probably right. But what you found then is you found QT, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the question asked what? Do you remember?
Oh. How much do buyers pay for the good?
Yeah, well, QT is what? On the horizontal axis, we graph. Q stands for, I'm waiting. It's the quantity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, are you agreeing with me just because? Because you're just like, yeah, whatever. Aren't
No,
you really?
it is.
Yeah. So 14.83 is the number of units that are being traded, right?
Yeah.
But it's not the price,
I
right?
just I didn't know what to multiply it to or to.
Well, I'll ask you, right? So for a standard like diagram here, this is not related, right? Boom. Where, because you do know this, you're just not thinking about it the right way. So this is a standard Cartesian plane type diagram. If I give you some graph like this, I'm going to try to do it in green instead of yellow. And I say, okay, here's a point on the diagram, right? And I say, okay, here's a value. Let's say X equals 10, right? Then if that point has X equal to 10, and I ask, well, what's the Y value? Right, because each one of these points on the line is associated with some set of coordinates, right? An X and a Y, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you agree with me, or you're like,
Yeah, you would just plug in the X to find Y.
yeah, but, and here we have the equation, right? the difference over in the like little old school, 8th grade diagram is I didn't tell you anything like y is equal to 100 plus, let's say, 3.5x. Then you would know, right? Because you would just plug x is equal in 10 there, right? And then y would be equal to what? You can do that one really quickly.
135.
Yeah, 135. Over here, and I have to ask, James, do you agree with her after-tax quantity, with Priscilla's after-tax quantity? I don't know because I didn't calculate it myself.
I'm not too sure myself, to be honest.
About the after-tax quantity?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, you see her calculation here, right, James? So you have a calculator.
Wait, are you referring to the 14.833? I mean, 14.83?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So you agree that that's the after-tax quantity. The question is, now we have to find, this would be the seller's after-tax price. Let's see. We have to find PS, and then the one up here would be PB. Right. And it's hard because we have the 24 there. So actually, I'm just going to try to be clear that this is not the same. It's that one there. And so, right. So Priscilla, what do you think now? Are you good?
I would just plug in the quantity in the demand formula.
Well, this is the supply, right?
Oh, the supply.
Yeah, and it's the original supply curve. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay.
I mean, that's what we indicated, this is the original supply. Do you see, James, what we're talking about?
Yeah, plugging the what was it? Is plugging in the. So wouldn't it be like 113 minus 4 times 14.83?
Well, okay, hold on a minute. Share, boom, share. Well, okay, so you tell me, James. This is 14.83 goes into here to get the suppliers. Are we looking for the buyer's or the seller's price in number 5?
Buyers.
Okay, that sounded like Derek. I can tell your voice. Good morning, Derek.
You were correct.
So the buyer's price, yeah. So we could actually plug it into that equation or the demand equation, but I think that you're right, James. It would make more sense to do the 113 because we're looking at this point here and it's on the demand curve, right? So what'd you get? 113 minus 4 times 14.83. Did you do it?
35.66.
You got 35.66. Okay. And do you agree, James?
I'm plugging in the numbers right now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh-oh. You guys both got 35.66. I think there must be a calculation error somewhere.
Oh, excuse me. I typed in the wrong. I got 53.68. So I did 113 minus 4 times 14.83, and I got 53.68.
And what did you get?
Yeah, I just got 53.68.
Guys. So I'm gonna give you a clap because you guys agree and you got it through the end. But anyway, hopefully, because we're done for today, but hopefully it's starting to click. Do you guys? Does anybody, Priscilla, James, do you have any questions?
No, I'm sorry. You could hear my sister teaching in the back.
Oh, is she teaching too?
Yeah,
What's she
kind
teaching?
of loud.
Actually, it
What
didn't
was that?
bother me at all. What is she
Oh,
teaching?
she teaches third graders.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, but anyway, it's not at all bothersome. It's I didn't hear anything. It's you know, this is, COVID teaching. So we're good. Um, okay, does anybody else have any other questions? No. Okay. So